At 9:21 a.m. on August 17th, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna stood beneath the left wing of a P-38 Lightning at Dobodura Airfield in New Guinea, watching his pilot walk toward a mission he almost certainly wouldn't survive. The pilot was Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 23 years old, 6 combat missions, not a single kill to his name. The Japanese had scrambled 18 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters to intercept the morning patrol, and Hayes was flying straight into the middle of them. McKenna had spent 8 months keeping these aircraft in the air. He knew the P-38 the way a surgeon knows anatomy. Every system, every tolerance, every weakness. And the P-38 had one weakness that no engineer in California seemed willing to fix, one that was putting good men in the ground week after week. It couldn't turn with a Zero. The Zero was lighter, more agile. It could execute a full horizontal turn in half the time a P-38 needed. In a dogfight, that half second was the margin between firing and being fired upon. American doctrine was clear. P-38 pilots should never turn with a Zero. Never try to outmaneuver them. Use speed, use altitude, dive in, shoot, climb out, hit and run. Don't get caught in a turning fight. Hayes had tried that doctrine 5 times. It hadn't worked. The Zeros were too smart. They baited American pilots into turns, cut inside their turning radius, got on their tail, and shot them down. The 5th Air Force had lost 37 P-38s in the past 6 weeks. Most were shot down after being caught in turning engagements they couldn't escape. The training manual called it pilot error. The instructor said these men weren't following doctrine. McKenna knew better. The problem wasn't the pilots, it was the control cables. The P-38's aileron cables ran through the twin booms to the tail section, then forward through pulleys to the wing control surfaces. The system had slack, not much, maybe 3/8 of an inch at full deflection, but that tiny amount of play created a delay between stick movement and aileron response. At high speeds, it didn't matter, but at low speeds, during hard turning maneuvers, that fraction of a second was the difference between rolling inside a Zero's turn and getting shot down. McKenna had raised this with the engineering officer 2 months earlier. The answer was simple. Cable tension was within specifications. Factory tolerances allowed for that slack. No field mechanic had authorization to touch flight control systems that required engineering approval from Lockheed, and Lockheed was 7,000 miles away in California. So the cables stayed loose, and pilots kept dying.
The first pilot McKenna lost to a Zero was Lieutenant David Chen, July 9th, 1943. Chen had been in theater for 3 weeks. McKenna worked on his aircraft every morning. They talked about California, Chen from Sacramento, McKenna from Long Beach. Both had worked on cars before the war. Chen came back from his sweep with 3 bullet holes in his left boom. He said the airplane had felt slow to respond, like there was a delay between when he moved the stick and when the aircraft actually rolled. Only his wingman shooting the Zero off his tail saved him. 3 weeks later, McKenna heard Chen had been killed, flying a different P-38 over Rabaul. Same story. Caught in a turning fight. Couldn't roll out fast enough. The second pilot was Captain William Morrison, a flight leader, experienced, 11 kills. He knew the P-38's limitations and flew smart. On August 3rd, Morrison intercepted 8 Zeros at 12,000 feet over Oro Bay. He got 1 on the first pass. 2 Zeros reversed on him. Over the radio, he called out that his controls felt mushy. The Zeros stayed with him and shot him down at 4,000 feet. Morrison died in the crash. The official report said pilot error. Rodriguez, Morrison's crew chief and McKenna's friend, didn't believe it. Neither did McKenna. By mid-August, McKenna had watched 17 pilots die. He had signed off their maintenance logs, watched them taxi out, watched them take off. The ones who came back told the same story, a slight lag between control input and aircraft reaction, just enough to get them killed. McKenna could hear it in the cables when he worked on them, a low twang when you plucked them. Loose cables sounded different than tight ones. Every P-38 on the line had cables that sounded slightly loose, within specification, but loose.
On the evening of August 16th, Hayes came to the maintenance area and found McKenna working on his assigned P-38. Hayes asked if there was anything McKenna could do to make the airplane roll faster, anything at all. He said he didn't care if it was regulation or not. He just wanted a chance. McKenna looked at Hayes, saw the fear, the desperation, a kid who knew he was going to die if something didn't change. McKenna told Hayes to come back in the morning. He'd see what he could do. McKenna worked alone that night. The maintenance hangar was quiet after 2,300 hours. The only sounds were the distant rumble of generators and the buzz of insects against the overhead lights. The air smelled like engine oil and tropical humidity. He pulled the inspection panel off Hayes's P-38 left boom. The metal was still warm from the day's sun. Inside, the aileron control cable ran through a series of pulleys toward the tail section. McKenna grabbed it with both hands and pulled. He felt the slack, maybe 3/8 of an inch of play before the tension caught. It was wrong. He knew it was wrong. The piano wire came from a salvaged P-38 that had ground looped 2 weeks earlier, a 6-inch piece of high-tensile wire from the rudder trim system. He'd kept it in his tool bag without really knowing why. Now he knew. He sat on the hangar floor and bent the wire into a Z shape with a pair of pliers. The wire was stiff, fought back. His hands slipped twice. He cut his thumb on the second try. Blood made the wire slippery. He wiped it on his coveralls and kept working. The Z shape would act as an inline tensioner. Add just enough preload to the cable to eliminate the slack. Installing it was harder. The space inside the boom was tight. He worked with one hand while holding a flashlight with the other. The beam kept moving. Shadows jumped across the cable system. His shoulder wedged against the boom structure, the metal edge cutting into his arm. He disconnected the cable at the pulley junction. His fingers fumbled with the clevis pin. Dropped it. Heard it bounce somewhere in the boom. Spent 5 minutes feeling around in the dark until he found it. The whole time, his heart was pounding. If the engineering officer found him doing unauthorized modifications to a flight control system, he'd face a court-martial. Possibly a dishonorable discharge. Maybe prison time. But Hayes was going to die if McKenna didn't do something. He inserted the tensioner, reconnected the cable. When the clevis pin finally seated, he tested the tension by hand. No slack. The control surface moved immediately. Perfect. McKenna replaced the inspection panel, cleaned up his tools, wiped the blood off the wire and his hands, and walked out of the hangar at 1:15. The tropical night was humid and still. Somewhere in the distance, aircraft engines. Japanese night raiders, probably. The sound made his stomach clench. He went to his bunk, didn't sleep, watched the ceiling until dawn.
Hayes's flight of 4 P-38s intercepted 9 Zeros at 13,000 feet over the Huon Gulf. The morning sun was behind them, perfect setup for a diving attack. Hayes picked a Zero at the back of the formation, dove from altitude, built speed to 380 miles per hour. The Zero grew larger in his gun sight. He pressed the trigger. The 4.50 caliber machine guns and single 20mm cannon hammered. A few hits sparked off the Zero's wing. Not enough. The Zero snap-rolled, right, and dove. Hayes rolled to follow. That's when he felt it. The airplane responded instantly. No delay, no lag. The stick moved, and the aircraft rolled immediately. He'd never felt his P-38 move like that, like the airplane had been waiting for his command and executed it the moment he gave it. He rolled 90 degrees in what felt like half the normal time, got his nose down. The Zero was right there in his sight picture. He fired again. 3-second burst. The rounds walked up the Zero's fuselage, from tail to cockpit. The engine exploded. Pieces flew off. The aircraft rolled inverted and fell toward the jungle below, trailing black smoke. Hayes's first kill. His wingman called out Zeros diving from above, 3 of them coming fast. They'd seen him shoot down their friend. Every instinct told Hayes to keep climbing, keep running. That was the doctrine. But doctrine meant dying today. He rolled hard left, pulled. The P-38 snapped around like nothing he'd ever experienced. The nose came through the horizon. The lead Zero hadn't expected Hayes to reverse that fast. It was exposed. Hayes pulled lead, fired, hit the Zero in the left wing root. The wing folded. The Zero tumbled. 2 kills in 30 seconds. The other 2 Zeros tried to scissor with him. Hayes stayed with them. Every time they reversed direction, his P-38 snapped into the turn instantly. No delay. No fighting the controls. The airplane did exactly what he wanted, the moment he wanted it. 1 Zero made a mistake, reversed too hard, bled too much speed. Hayes got inside his turn, close range, maybe 200 feet. He fired, couldn't miss. The Zero came apart, 3 kills, 7 minutes. The 4th Zero ran. When Hayes landed at Dobodura at 0903, McKenna was waiting on the flight line. Hayes climbed out of the cockpit, hands shaking, flight suit soaked with sweat. He walked straight to McKenna. 2 words. It worked.
What neither of them realized, 6 other pilots had watched the engagement from altitude. Captain Frank Mitchell, a flight leader in the 475th Fighter Group, saw Hayes's P-38 rolling faster than any Lightning he'd ever seen. He found Hayes in the debriefing room. Hayes said he should talk to Technical Sergeant McKenna. Mitchell found McKenna 2 hours later, hands black with grease. He asked him directly, "What did you do to Hayes's airplane?" McKenna told him everything. The piano wire tensioner, the cable modification, the unauthorized change to the flight control system. Mitchell listened without interrupting, then asked if McKenna could do the same to his aircraft. McKenna said yes, but Mitchell had to understand the risks. The modification wasn't approved, wasn't tested. If something went wrong, both of them would face charges. Mitchell said he didn't care. He'd lost 4 pilots in the past month, all caught in turning fights they couldn't escape. Regulations could wait. That evening, McKenna modified Mitchell's P-38. Mitchell flew it the next morning and came back raving. The airplane rolled like a fighter instead of a truck. His wingman wanted the modification. Then the next pilot. Then the next. By August 20th, McKenna had modified 9 aircraft. No official documentation, no engineering approval, just whispered conversations in the ready room and the maintenance area. Cut the wire, bend it into a Z-shape, install it as an inline tensioner. 8 minutes. Changes everything. By early September, roughly 40 P-38s in New Guinea had the modification. Crew chiefs removed the tensioners before inspections and reinstalled them afterward. The pilots knew, the mechanics knew. Nobody told the officers.
The kill ratio started shifting. In July, American pilots in the Southwest Pacific lost 2 P-38s for every Zero destroyed. In August, it was 1.3 to 1. By September, it was nearly even. Something had changed, but officially, nobody knew what. Then the Japanese noticed. Flight reports from the 11th Air Fleet noted that American P-38s were maneuvering more aggressively, rolling faster into turns, reversing direction more quickly. Tactics that had worked reliably for months were suddenly failing. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's top aces, 64 confirmed kills, fighting American pilots since Pearl Harbor, engaged a P-38 over Wewak on September 3rd. He used his standard tactic: draw the American into a turning fight, wait for the P-38 to begin its roll, then snap back the opposite direction to get inside the turning radius. Except the P-38 reversed with him. Sakai had executed this maneuver dozens of times. He knew exactly how long it took a P-38 to roll. But this one rolled faster than it should have. He barely avoided a head-on collision. The American got guns on him. Sakai had to dive away. He returned to base confused and frustrated. Japanese intelligence examined wreckage from downed P-38s, found no obvious modifications. The aircraft looked identical. The engines were the same. The armament was the same. Nothing visible had changed. What they didn't know was that the change was hidden inside the boom. A 6-inch piece of piano wire that looked like original equipment. Even if they'd found it, they might not have understood its purpose. It wasn't a new weapon system, wasn't a new engine, just a minor modification to cable tension. But that modification was killing their pilots. By the end of September, the 11th Air Fleet had lost 38 fighters in combat with P-38s. American losses in the same period, 22 aircraft. The ratio had reversed. For the first time in the Pacific War, P-38s were killing Zeros at better than a 1-to-1 rate. Japanese command ordered pilots to avoid engaging P-38s unless they had significant numerical advantage. The Zero had gone from hunter to hunted, and it all came down to a piece of piano wire that nobody was supposed to install.
The modification never became official during the war. The Army Air Force Engineering Command learned about it in October 1943, when a maintenance inspector at Dobodura noticed inconsistent cable tension readings. He traced the discrepancies to the piano wire tensioners, wrote a report, and sent it up the chain of command. The report sat on desks for 3 weeks, while officers debated what to do. The modification violated regulations, but it was working. Fighter squadrons using it had measurably better kill ratios. Pilots were surviving. The question wasn't whether the modification helped. The question was whether to punish the mechanics who'd installed it without authorization or quietly approve it after the fact. In November, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea to evaluate it. They tested it, measured the cable tension, calculated stress loads, ran flight tests. Their conclusion: the modification was safe and effective. It should have been part of the original design. Lockheed integrated a similar tensioning system into the P-38J model, which entered production in December 1943. McKenna never received official credit. No commendation, no medal, no mention in any report. The official Lockheed documentation attributed the improvement to engineering analysis. McKenna's name didn't appear anywhere.
Hayes survived the war. He flew 63 combat missions, shot down 11 Japanese aircraft, and returned to Iowa in 1945. He married his high school sweetheart, had 4 children, and worked as a crop duster for 37 years. He never forgot what McKenna had done. Every year on August 17th, the anniversary of that first modified flight, Hayes called McKenna to thank him for saving his life. Mitchell also survived. He became a squadron commander, led his unit through the Philippines campaign, and shot down 16 aircraft total. After the war, he stayed in the Air Force and retired as a colonel in 1963. He told the story of McKenna's modification to every young maintenance officer he supervised, making sure they understood that sometimes the best solutions come from enlisted mechanics who see problems the engineers miss. McKenna stayed in the Army Air Force until 1946, then returned to California. He went back to working on cars and opened his own garage in Long Beach in 1948. He worked on engines for 42 years. He never talked much about the war. When people asked, he'd say he was a mechanic. Fixed airplanes, that's all. In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications found references to the piano wire tensioner in maintenance logs from New Guinea. He tracked McKenna down through veteran registries. McKenna was 73 years old, still working part-time in his garage. The historian estimated the modification may have saved between 80 and 100 American pilots' lives, based on survival rate improvements in squadrons that used it. McKenna said he never counted. He just remembered the pilots who came back: Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, the others. That was enough. James McKenna died in 2006 at age 88. He was buried at Pacific View Memorial Park in California. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II as an aircraft mechanic. It did not mention the piano wire tensioner, did not mention that he'd changed how American fighters flew, did not mention that he'd broken regulations to save lives. His garage in Long Beach is still there, different owner now. But on the wall in the back office, there's a faded photograph, a young mechanic in coveralls standing next to a P-38 Lightning. The date written on the back, August 1943, New Guinea.
That's how innovation actually happens in war. Not through official channels, not through engineering committees or procurement boards, not through the men whose names end up in the reports, through sergeants and mechanics who see a problem, find a solution, and don't wait for permission to save lives. McKenna didn't have a degree in aeronautical engineering. He didn't file a proposal. He didn't schedule a meeting. He sat on a hangar floor at midnight with a pair of pliers, a piece of scrap wire, and the knowledge that a good man was going to die if he didn't do something. 8 minutes. 0.4 pounds of tension. A fraction of a second of response time. That was the difference between dying over the Huon Gulf and coming home to Iowa.
If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us bring more forgotten stories from the Second World War to people who deserve to hear them. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania, from veterans to history enthusiasts, and you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.